Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for ADramofOutlander.com for all things Outlander, from the Diana Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and everything in between. This is episode 97, and we're doing a bit of a Voyager synopsis. Hello! I am going through the Outlandish Companion, Volume 1, Voyager description. This way it gives us the highlights and reminds us what we can expect for Season 3 of Outlander. It starts in a few short weeks, and it has been a long Outlander, to be sure. Let's see. We did a 26-week Voyager read-along, and then a 22-week The Scottish Prisoner read-along, and then a 6-week novella read-along of A Fugitive Green. So we've really gotten to know these characters and gotten good background information that will carry us into Season 3. Because if you don't go through the novellas and the side series, there's so much information that is left out of the big books. You could be wondering why in the heck a character is acting in a certain way. You don't really have to have it, but if you really want the fullness of their dimension, it's good to go back and look at those books as well. So Voyager is the third book in the Outlander series. Yes, duh, I know, but everybody is not a book reader, and that's fine. I'm somebody who hasn't read the Game of Thrones books, and I will after the series ends. But yet I'm a huge fan of the show. So it's really fun to sit back and watch diehard fans who look at every detail and are matching up all the things for that show, because that's what a lot of us do for Outlander. So I really appreciate it. Let's dive right on in where we left off in Season 2. This is where I'm combining book and TV show, which I don't do very often on the podcast because they are absolutely different verses. But for the sake of preparation for Season 3, we can look at the book synopsis just to give us an outline. Is it going to be identical? No. From all the reports that I've read and interviews that I've heard, it's going to be pretty darn close to the book. And all the flavors that we want and the highlights should be there. There will likely be characters that we have never met in the books, and that's okay. They'll be fulfilling a space that is fine and can be necessary. So again, we left off on Season 2 with Jamie sending Claire very reluctantly through the stones the morning of the Culloden battle, right before it began. She, as I said, reluctantly went through and was horrendously aggrieved when she did. Her return to Frank was definitely tumultuous. I mean, so much so, he even burnt her clothing, even though as a historian, he knew it had to be authentic and she could not possibly be lying about where she'd been. And we forwarded at the end of Season 2 to Frank's death and the aftermath with that. Claire and Bree went on a trip to Scotland, and this is where they met Roger Wakefield, also known as Roger Mackenzie. That's his given name. Wakefield was his uncle's last name, and he was adopted when his parents, or rather his mother, was killed in a bombing raid in World War II. And the scene that we first get is where Claire and Bree go to Reverend Wakefield's hoping to see him because he was a longtime family friend and a historian as well. But they found out they had missed him by just weeks. He had passed away, and Roger was having a wake and reception for the Reverend the day that they were there. So this sets off a whole set of events that come into place. We find Geillis Duncan when she's Gillian Edgars, and she is a Jacobite historian or authority speaking on the Jacobites. But turns out she's got a plan, and Claire figures it out. And we see Gillian kill her husband, or we presume she kills her husband. She burns him up at the stones so she can go through. And this is the 1968 reference she made to Claire back at the witch trial, right? Yes, Geillis, Gillian is a traveler. Claire has been able to secure her diaries, and that's going to give us some information going into the future. Now, Roger and Bree finally believe her that she's not crazy, and people do travel, and they go on the search for Jamie. Did he survive Culloden? At first, Claire just wants to know about the men, but then they start looking for Jamie. And he could be alive, right? So that's Claire's story moving forward, in essence. And Brianna and Roger are forming a relationship. And on the other side, we see that Jamie was preparing to go into battle, completely, absolutely expecting to die. He did not want to survive Culloden. That was his whole purpose. He couldn't turn back. He had to fight. And that's where he was going after he sent Claire through the stones. So that is where we are left. And we pick up in the future for Claire, just as we left her, and at Culloden with Jamie. I think it's probably one of the best opening paragraphs of any book I've ever read. He was dead. However, his nose throbbed painfully, which he thought odd in the circumstances. While he placed considerable trust in the understanding and mercy of his Creator, he harbored that residue of elemental guilt that made all men fear the chance of hell. Still, all he had ever heard of hell made him think it unlikely that the torments reserved for its luckless inhabitants could be restricted to a sore nose. On the other hand, this couldn't be heaven on several counts. For one, he didn't deserve it. For another, it didn't look it. And for a third, he doubted that the rewards of the blessed included a broken nose and more than those of the damned. His hand struck something hard and the fingers tangled in wet, snarled hair. He sat up abruptly and with some effort cracked the layer of dried blood that had sealed his eyes shut. Memory flooded back, and he groaned aloud. He had been mistaken. This was hell. But James Fraser was unfortunately not dead, after all. So he wakes up on the Culloden battlefield. But his eyes are crusted shut, and he's not sure if he's alive. Yep, he is alive, and his nose got busted, and he probably busted up some other parts that had been busted before, too. That poor man is a huge walking set of scars. And he found a body on top of him, and it was that of Black Jack Randall, who was dead. Oh, I wonder how that's going to play on screen. Is it going to be a cutaway to that, and then the battle's all in memory? Or are we going to actually see the battle play out? And then it cuts to him thinking he's dead, and he's not. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. Some very very fortunate people who were able to attend the San Diego Comic-Con already saw episode 1. So they know how it played out, but we do not. So Jaime also has a pretty serious wound on his leg, and bad enough to where he could die of an infection within mere days, regardless. Well, several of the Highlanders temporarily took refuge in a farmhouse by Culloden moor, and they are there for 2 days. They can't travel. They're all too much in desperate measure of medical attention. They are likely going to die from infections or starvation, etc. They can hear the English troops about, and they can smell the burning of the corpses. You can't just leave them on the field. But all of them are simply burned. They're not given proper burials. I can't imagine witnessing that even from inside of a building nearby. As the farmhouse is discovered, and they are discovered, Lord Melton, which is Harold, or rather Hal, Lord John's older brother, is in charge of this. And he keeps meticulous record of the Highlanders that are there. They are put to death, because this is treason, of course. They fought against the king. And when he gets to Jaime, well, something really interesting happens. Jaime actually wants to die. However, do you remember way back at Preston Pans when, for honor, he made a deal with a young 16-year-old Lord John a few months prior, and because he spared John's life, he gets a sparing of life if they ever came across each other. So when Hal comes across Jaime's name, he knows it's Red Jaime. He knows it's the same person that they owe a family debt of honor to, and he can't kill him because of this. He's just unable to. So he puts him on a cart, hidden underneath blankets, and sends him back to Lallybroch. This sounds great at first, except that Jaime has a wound that can likely kill him, and there's nothing that anyone can do to fix it. But the Highlands are filled with angry English officers. So this cannot bode well for Lallybroch. But Jaime's alive. Wow. So in 1968, where we know Claire and Brianna and Roger Wakefield are, he figures out that Jaime didn't die at Culloden, as Claire always held. Now, one of the biggest questions that fans have is, why did Claire never look? Why did she not read Frank's books that he wrote? He was a historian, and he wrote about the Jacobites and the uprisings. Well, she promised Frank she would never bring it up. That was one of the bargains that they had made. However, it doesn't seem like Frank stopped looking in his lifetime. So Claire, I think, really needed to believe that Jaime died that day. Because if she believed that he lived, could she have stayed? Would she have stayed with Brianna and raised her? Could she have stayed married to Frank in their tenuous and difficult yet committed marriage? Would she have gone to school to become a doctor? Would she dropped everything and have returned to the past because of how much she loved and needed Jaime Fraser? They're great questions. What do you think? I would love your feedback on any of these details, because we don't know. But after being in Claire's head for a quarter of a century, I think it was because she had to. It was her coping mechanism, and it was her way of staying in the present where she was and not living in the past. And in the series, it was Mrs. Graham who told her she had to let go of the past. So I think Claire honored that, and the best way she could, even if it was for self-preservation, she still honored it. So they become detectives in history and looking through as much information as possible to see if they can find Jamie in history. Now, it's really difficult to find somebody who is a, quote, regular person. Well, even though he played a pivotal role in the uprising, he would not necessarily show up in other places later on. And Bree was really unhappy about this, and she didn't know what to make of it. I mean, she's learning that she was fathered by a man in the 18th century. That's where she got her height from and her anger from, and all of these things, all these attributes that came from Jamie, yet she was raised lovingly and well by Frank. He did love her. She was his daughter as well. So it's this incredible challenge, and Claire can't really speak openly with Brianna about her feelings and what's going on, but she talks to Roger, and he's fascinated just as much, but he does not have the same emotional involvement. And he's in the process of clearing out the manse, and so this gives him something else to do, clearly. But he is enamored with this family, and he'd met Claire when he was a young boy, if you remember. And Frank. And Frank and the Reverend had stayed in contact over the years. So this family was familiar to Roger. And Roger finds more out about what happened to Claire when she returned from the past, and that she was starving, half mad, and she was pregnant. So that part is true. So we know, okay, Claire's not crazy and she's not lying. She tells him how she got back to life for the sake of Jamie's child, for the sake of Brianna, and to fulfill her destiny of being a healer, because that's who she really was at the core. And she was able to do both of these things because of Frank. He loved her, but he was angry at her. And as Diana puts it, rage. He has rage about this. But he supports it, and he supports her. So we also have to remember that divorce did not take place commonly in the 1960s. It did happen. And Frank had grounds for that because his wife came back pregnant after being gone. It wouldn't have been good for Bree to have a mother who may not have been able to go to medical school, could not have provided for her well, and she needed a father. This was a good scenario for both Frank and Claire and Brianna, even though I cannot imagine the difficulty there. Roger is finding himself in this situation, kind of stuck between these two women. He adores Claire, and he's drawn to her and her strength, and he's falling in love with Brianna. And the more he researches for them, he feels the presence of Jamie Fraser alongside them. While all this is going on, Jamie's story is moving forward as well. He gets back to Lallybroch, he survives his wound, and becomes the Dubonnet. He's living in a cave for 7 years because there's English patrols in the district, and they're burning, looting, and even killing people. And if they suspect somebody is still acting in a treasonous manner, they're getting jailed. He is in this tiny cave, living by himself, like an animal. He survives the loneliness, the hardship, the grief, but he's able to catch animals sometimes and leave them for the family. He's providing for them and protecting them in any way that he can. He never speaks Claire's names and allows everyone to assume that she is dead. But every day he speaks that prayer, Lord, that she may be safe, she and the child. It is very difficult in the Highlands. not even for those who fought for Charles Stuart. The English soldiers were marauding. There was near famine, danger, and the inhabitants of Lallybroch did not escape that. At one point, when Jenny was in labor with her baby and he decided to go down to the house, he made a grave error by shooting a pistol at some birds, which I don't think Jamie would ever do. I still don't understand that little thing that he did, because it would bring soldiers. They were not allowed to have weapons as Highlanders anymore. And it attracted the attention of the soldiers, and Jenny had to pretend that the baby died, as did the midwife, and Jamie and the baby were stuck in a wardrobe. And it wasn't the Lion Witch in the wardrobe. And there was nothing magical about it. And the soldiers went away, but Jenny was furious. And Jamie couldn't come down from the cave anymore. And then he decides, as a way to bring some security and safety back to his family, that he would arrange for one of his tenants to turn him in to the English, because there's a reward. And if he just turned himself over, nobody would get the reward. But he's Red Jamie, so his family could get quite a bit of money to put aside to take care of Lallybroch and all its inhabitants. As he prepares for this eventuality of going to prison, Jenny is unhappy about this. She says, "But Jamie, even if they didn't hang you outright, and that's the hell of a risk to take, Jamie, you could be killed when they take you." He doesn't really care, but she does care. And he promises that he'll mind himself and not fight when they come to get him. And we saw a little bit about that in one of the trailers that has been released, but it makes it look like Jenny is the one who betrayed him. Now, depending on how quickly they have to move the storyline forward, that would make sense. Jenny's already there, and she can turn him in. But I don't know if that's simple editing in a trailer, right? As he strolls back up, "I'm home." We'll see. One of the things that I know many of us are looking forward to is the night before the arranged turning in of Jamie happens. Mary McNabb goes to the cave to give him a meal and some tenderness. I'm really hoping they put that in. So many fans are angry that he would have sex with her, right? Oh my gosh, what a kindness. To send somebody away who has been living in a cave for 7 years, lost his wife, is someone who really should be married and have a woman around him, physically loving him, taking care of him, and being his partner in life so he can take care of her and physically love her back. And to have that passion, and he had that with Claire, even though it was a short time period of a few years, they had that. And it's really hard to close Pandora's box when you have something wonderful. So she knew she could not replace his wife, but she wanted to send him off with something tender. To me, that is a type of sacrificial love, and it wasn't her trying to just get with him. I think it was sweet and decent and a gift that nobody else could give him who was there. What say you? I know some of us are jealous about it, but Claire wasn't there, and he was going away and maybe never coming back. So he's taken to Ardsmuir, and we also saw that in one of the trailers. And it's supposed to be in a terrible northwestern part of Scotland that is very desolate. There's nowhere to go. They don't even have to have good security at the prison because there's no food. There's nothing nearby. So you can't get enough to sustain yourself or to get anywhere if you did escape. So he goes there. And this is where he meets Lord John Grey. Now his backstory, as we find it, this is many years post Culloden, right? And after that despicable incident where he fools John and breaks his arm at Preston Pans. Well, in this present time, we find him exiled to Ardsmuir to become the governor after Harry Corey, who we got to know pretty well in The Scottish Prisoner and in the A Fugitive Green novella. And John is sent there because he had a scandalous affair. And it was the only way to make things die down appropriately. He doesn't like his new surroundings. It's remote and uncomfortable and downright unpleasant for him. He doesn't like the prisoners either. He finds them grim and dour. And he sees Jamie Fraser, Laird of Broch on the rolls. Oh. And Harry has had Jamie shackled this whole time. That is horrendous. I can't even imagine. You can't. How do you even wipe your behind when you're like that? So he's ashamed of the encounter he had with Jamie at Preston Pans. And he has a desire for revenge and a sense of honor that makes it impossible because he's in a position of utmost power over Jamie. So this is something where John struggles with routinely. And we saw it through The Scottish Prisoner, and we've seen it in other stories with him involved. This is always his struggle. He cannot abuse his position because the Greys have always been men of honor. He says he'll never see Fraser alone, never speak to him. Yeah, do you think that's possible? Especially when it's no doubt that the Highlanders that are in prison make Jamie sort of their leader, right? And turns out pretty quickly he needs somebody who can speak Gaelic. There's a man, a stranger in a village, speaking of gold. And the only person who can speak French and Gaelic is Jamie. So Grey has to petition his help. And they strike a very tenuous deal. And they're wondering, well, John is wondering if this could be the gold that is rumored to have been sent by King Louis to aid his cousin, Stuart. We don't know, but that money has a way of continuing to crop up. The irons are removed, and they go to this village, and Jamie talks to the man. And he says he will not keep any secrets. Jamie tells John everything the man told him, except he did not tell him that Duncan Kerr recognizes Jamie. And these ravings of this man did make some kind of sense to Jamie that would not to anyone else. Duncan speaks of the White Witch. Well, Claire was called the White Witch. And he doesn't know what she may have to do with this treasure or Seal Island. But Jamie has to figure out, did Claire not make it through? Did she escape to somewhere else? So after they return to Ardsmuir, Jamie escapes. Because like I said, there's not a whole lot of security because there's no place for people to go. Jamie makes his way out to Seal Island, and he does find something of interest. However, not Claire. He finds no evidence of her whatsoever. So he gets himself recaptured. Of course, Lord John is out looking for him with some of the men from the prison, and Jamie comes upon him when he's having a private moment, taking care of some ablutions. Again, they forge some kind of relationship, a bond. And Jamie says that he followed the spirit of what John had said, and he wasn't going to tell him why he was doing what he was doing. Okay. But they had a custom to resume that Jamie had with Harry Quarry, weekly dinners. And at these dinners, Jamie would speak as the chief and spokesman for the prisoners. He would present problems and requests. And during this time, John doesn't learn a whole lot about the treasure until he thinks of blackmailing Jamie against his family. So Jamie gives part of it, only part of it. And it's not the gold, but a small cache of gems. And he says he threw them into the sea because he doesn't see why the English should have it. So John believes him, and they continue to have their weekly dinners. Jamie rarely drinks except for a little bit of sherry. They discuss art and books, and they play chess. And John is finding himself falling in love with Jamie Fraser. Terrible. And against his better judgment and his normal honor of not trying to abuse his position of power, he makes an approach to Jamie. It's a very subtle sexual approach, but he does. And it's rebuked. And Jamie does not take this lightly. Now, John does not know that Jamie was raped by Blackjack Randall, but it doesn't matter. You take all of Jamie's history aside, John, as the governor of this prison, never should have made any sort of attempt to seduce or make a sexual overture to a prisoner. It's just not okay in that position of power. So Jamie made it even a more final break when he took responsibility for a small bit of clan tartan being found, which was a crime for anyone to hold after Culloden, and he took the penalty of flogging, and Gray had to carry it out. Wow, that's wild on Jamie's part, and even so difficult on John's part to have to do. But Jamie made his feelings clear there, didn't he? So now we move back to Roger getting much closer to finding Jamie. And we've already seen clips for the TV show that they find him, and that they find him on the Ardsmuir prison roll. So what happened to him after that? Now they need to see if they can find him at another fixed point in time. The prisoners of Ardsmuir were transported to the American colonies to serve as indentured labor, with the exception of Jamie. Because he was a convicted traitor, his sentence couldn't be commuted unless it was the king's pleasure to do so. So John secured a place for Jamie to go and live and work as a paroled prisoner. And it's a place called Hellwater in the north of England called the Lake District. He would work with the horses and serve as a groom. Jamie thought this was Lord John's revenge to have him sentenced to menial work. But he realizes what John had done was save him from the hardship of transportation and slave labor and given him a semblance of freedom. He could be outdoors. He was working with horses. He was doing something he knew how to do well. And John had done that for him. So it wasn't true freedom. He couldn't leave the property without permission, but he finds some contentment there, and he uses the pseudonym Alex Mackenzie, which is part of his name because he has lots of names. And he seems to be doing well until Geneva Dunsany, the eldest daughter who was going to be married off to an old earl, decides that she wants him and she likes him and he's going to take her virginity. And this is pretty scary because if Jamie is found having relations with her, he's a prisoner still and he's a groom. There's a lot of issues socially with it. But this is when virginity was considered a bargaining chip, and it would make her lose her opportunity at getting married into a higher status. So he doesn't want to do this. However, she forces him to. She retrieves a letter that he had sent, or that was sent to him by his family, and uses it because he's not supposed to receive any sort of letters that aren't read, or he's not supposed to send any either. So this is contraband, and she holds it over him. So she coerces him into taking her virginity. Now, some people think this is awesome, and she's smart, and she's really cool. Geneva's a sexual predator. If the roles were reversed and she was a boy and he was female, she could be charged with rape. She coerced sex from him. She was in a position of authority, and he was a prisoner. And even if he wasn't a prisoner, he was a groom, which is one of the lowest people of the household. And I really hope in the TV show that this is displayed that way, that she forced him to have sex with her. And it was out of fear for his family and to protect his family that he went along with it. And then some of you, and some, not maybe you, it's you in quotation marks, will say, well, he was able to get aroused. Okay, he hadn't had sex for 7 years since he left Claire at the Stones. And then he had a little something with Mary McNabb. Then hadn't had sex the whole time he was at Ardsmuir prison. And the whole time he's been at Hellwater. Yeah. I think he would be aroused by a marriageable age young woman who is naked. I get it. Moving forward. Geneva was married, and she got that one night with him. He thinks everything's good until word comes back that she was pregnant. And he's like, oh, he was with her just prior to her marriage, so it was impossible to say. But 6 months later, she had birthed and had died of a hemorrhage, and he took her father and sister, basically her family, to where Geneva was living with Ellesmere in a very bad storm, and she was dead, but the baby was alive and healthy. Now, the Earl of Ellesmere was ranting. He was drunk, he was raging, and he claimed the child was not his. And all hell breaks loose, okay? And the Earl of Ellesmere takes the baby and is going to throw the baby out the window. And they're up on another level. They're not on a ground floor. This is pretty scary. It's 30 feet below. Number one, Jamie can never let this happen. Number two, this could be his child. So he grabs the pistol and turns and fires it. The baby even stopped screaming at this, and everyone else went silent. Jamie was able to retrieve the baby, but Ellesmere was at his feet. Wow. This was a big deal. So Lady Dunsany was so gracious about Jamie saving her grandchild that she offers to pardon him. But now he can't leave. He can't leave with this child here, knowing this child is likely his. He declines her offer for the present, but now he can be free at any point that he wants to be. So years go by, and there's peace and contentment, but he is lonely. But he gets to see William, who, though he can't claim him publicly as his own, he gets to see him raised, and he's a bonny lad, and he calls Jamie Mac. as he gets bigger. And Willie continues to grow, and he begins to look far too much like Jamie. Now, no one in the family has talked about it. And under the law, whoever you're legally married to is who the parent, the father of your child is. So it wouldn't have mattered. William was still the Earl of Ellesmere, legally. And at this point, Jamie figures that Lady Dunsany and the surviving sister know what's going on. And even Lord Dunsany probably know he fathered the child, but nobody will talk about it. They're just ignoring that fact. But William is starting to look more and more like Jamie. So he has to leave. He's pardoned, and Lady Dunsany and Lord John Grey, who hold influence, make this happen. And John comes to say goodbye to Jamie. And he figures out that Jamie is William's biological father. And then what comes next is Lord John says he's marrying Lady Isabel, Geneva's younger sister, and he will become William's guardian. So this is how they stay in each other's periphery, but Jamie may also be able to get news about William on occasion. Now he's set to go back to Lallybroch, a place he has not known for a very long time. He's leaving a boy who he cannot claim, but is clearly his. And you know, Jamie loves family. That man deserved to have lots of children. So we know that Lord John's main reason for doing this was to become guardian of this child. Well, but that's also what Lord Dunsany had asked him to do. This was before John knew that William was presumably Jamie's biologically. But that's not what Jamie thinks. He doesn't know that. And then Jamie offers himself up bodily to John, knowing that John is interested in him. But this offer, I don't think it's a true offer. He's not really saying, hey, have sex with me. I think if John would have taken him up on that offer, that Jamie would have killed him. Because there's no way that he would see John as being fit for being the guardian of William. Interesting. Lord John, of course, is tempted. But he knows that Jamie cannot give him a love that he wants. He will settle for the friendship, and that both men can care about each other sincerely. It's more complex than that, but I don't think that Jamie ever would have allowed that pass to happen. So Jamie leaves, and he has to say goodbye to William and Hellwater. And he's going home to Lallybroch, a place that doesn't know him anymore. He hasn't been the laird since the eve of Culloden, when he handed it over to young Jamie, his nephew. So back in 1968, we're nearing Samhain, the November Feast of All Souls. This is right around Claire's 50th birthday. I love being the same age as her now. It's pretty thrilling. Now what? Yeah, and they traced him. They traced him to a printer's shop in Edinburgh, where an A. Malcolm printed commercial matter and political pamphlets, and that matches a written document that's in Jamie's own hand that they found. So she thinks she can go back to about 20 years past her departure on the eve of Culloden, and she might be able to find A. Malcolm. Should she? And Bree is grown. She's a college student. She has Roger. Is it worth the sacrifice? I know we all say that we would do it. And now that Frank is gone, her promise to him is void. Brianna urges her to go. Claire is unsure, even until the moment that she climbs the hill of Craignadoon. And she sees Roger and Brianna there. They're waiting for her. And Brianna's dressed in 18th century clothes. And if Claire doesn't go, she says she's going to because she has to find him. Somebody must find him and know someone who can tell him his sacrifice was not in vain, that his wife and child survived. I love this piece of writing. She was holding my hands tight between her own, squeezing hard. He gave you to me, she said. Now I have to give you back to him, Mama. The eyes that were so like Jamie's looked down at me, blurred by tears. If you find him, when you find my father, give him this. And she bent and kissed me fiercely, gently, then straightened and turned me toward the stone. Go, Mama. I love you. Go. From the corner of my eye, I saw Roger move toward her. I took one step and then another. I heard a sound, a faint roaring. I took the last step and the world disappeared. That's very difficult, and Claire's already gone through twice, so this is her third trip. It's pretty unprecedented from everything we read in the books, from the other travelers. And she finds her way to Edinburgh, which is a very long trip from Inverness. Even now, it takes, 4 hours? 5 hours maybe to get from Inverness to Edinburgh if the weather's decent and the roads are clear. So this is a long journey for Claire. And she goes to Carfax Close. And is A. Malcolm truly Jamie? Is it James Alexander Malcolm Mackenzie Fraser? And then what? She gets to the door in Carfax Close. And she opens it. And she takes surveillance of the room. The posters, the notices, the broad counter in front of the room, the printing press, and with his back turned to her, Jamie was bent over it. Is that you, Geordie? Took you long enough. Did you get the... It isn't Geordie. It's me, Claire. And we all freak out and run around screaming and clapping with joy, right? I don't know how it's going to be in the book. And I don't know how this is going to be in the show, and some of it's going to be a little bit different, but I know that Matthew Roberts wrote this episode. We all know that. And he is a fan of these books. I think this is going to be amazing what they do with this, because it's awkward and tender and wonderful, and the anticipation we get to feel right along with Claire. The other part of this we have to remember is that Claire has been searching for him for 6 months. She's been making plans. She had no way to send him a message ahead of time saying, hey, I might be coming. So she has known about this for half a year. And he is completely surprised. He has no time to prepare. And she has no idea what state his life is in at this point, if he's married or not. So they have a tender and joyous, shocking reunion. And she brought pictures with her of Brianna at all kinds of ages. And Claire looks around and doesn't see a touch of a woman in this house. And then Jamie remembers that he's forgotten he has to do something, and he has to go retrieve someone he works with named Mr. Willoughby. And this is the first misadventure since they're back, besides Jamie fainting when Claire arrives and he realizes that she's real. So Jamie had found somebody that he called Mr. Willoughby, who is a Chinese associate that he picked up on the docks a couple of years earlier. And there's a riot at the tavern caused by Mr. Willoughby because Yi Chen Cho happens to like women's feet a lot. And he's drunk and should never have alcohol and be in the presence of anyone. So they end up having to flee through the back streets, and they ultimately end up at a brothel who has a proprietor that's on very friendly terms with Jamie. And this makes Claire wonder if he is serviced there. Why does he have a room there? So she's jumping to all these conclusions. Now, mind you, she hasn't been there very long. She has no idea what he's been up to. She knows what her life has been, but has no idea anything about the details of his, except he was the Dubonnet, he went to prison, And here he is now. That's a lot of years that still need to be filled in. Jamie is a printer. Madame Jean likes to work with him, and she provides a hiding place for smuggled goods, and they have a business arrangement. They have a wonderful reunion that night, and this brings us to something very interesting in the morning. But then there's a visitor at the door. It's Ian, his brother-in-law. And it's really funny because Claire's hiding in bed. And Ian is horrified that Jamie married a whore. And Claire says, I wouldn't call it that exactly. Hello. And she waves. Been a long time, hasn't it? Surprised Ian didn't faint straight away. So she ends up reacquainting herself with Ian. And it turns out that Ian is there looking for young Ian, his son, who has run away from Lallybroch again. Oh, that boy. He's after his uncle's heart. So Jamie says he doesn't know anything about young Ian's whereabouts, etc., etc. But he goes off with Ian for a while, and Claire had been waiting for food and something to wear. But it never came. Instead, she has a visitor from Yi Chin Cho, Mr. Willoughby, and he tells her the story of how he met Jamie and that Jamie had saved his life. And then young Ian shows up, and he thinks that Claire is mistress, and he's horrified and disappears. Just during this whole time, Claire realizes that the clothes and food are not coming. So she wraps herself in a quilt and she goes to the kitchens where she has a whore's brunch with the prostitutes, and they mistake her for a new recruit. Oh, it is so funny. That whole scene is amazing. And Madame Jean comes in and is horrified by this, and she wants to get Claire dressed and properly, and she shouldn't be having breakfast with the whores, mind you. And while Claire's waiting to get a dress, she hears that there's a murder. There's a fiend afoot. So this makes Claire very uneasy, and Jamie has still not returned from his errand, and young Ian is wandering about the city. And where is everyone and what is going on? So there's a big row. She ends up running into Fergus there and some man who is obviously up to no good. And then Mr. Willoughby accidentally kills him. So it's a disaster. So Jamie leaves for a couple of hours and comes back to Claire covered in blood. And they have this dead body. It's an excise man to deal with. It's a mess. So we are going to stop here, and this may take us the 3 episodes prior to the premiere of season 3 to kind of get through this synopsis of the book to prepare us for what is likely coming. Again, everything will not be the same, but most of the key things I presume will be in here. And I can't wait to meet a grown-up Fergus, to meet young Ian as a teenager, to see a more mature Jamie and Claire, even though they're not aged drastically makeup-wise. Claire is aging very slowly, and it's probably from her going through the stones anyway, so that makes up for it. She will not have that dramatic silver streak, but there'll be some in her hair. So we find that Jamie is a printer slash smuggler slash who knows what else he's doing. Fergus is still with him. Young Ian is obviously working for him and hasn't told his father. So Ian Murray, the dad, is probably going to be really angry. Everyone thinks that Claire is a whore, which seems to be a running gag throughout the books. And now they have a dead excise man. Claire has no clothes, and Jamie has to fix this. So what is going on? All his names and occupations cannot be combined. Would have been a lot easier back then than it would be now. So what do you think of this first section? Are there any parts that, besides the print shop scene, that you're really looking forward to? I'm looking forward to Claire and Brianna shopping for dresses at that very expensive shop. And Claire trying to reacclimate and seeing the relationship between Brianna and Roger a little bit. And Claire, she's had a pretty methodical life, a pretty scheduled life since she left and came back. She had a baby, was a stay-at-home mama, then she went to medical school and then became a surgeon, and she's had hours. She worked and took care of her daughter. So her life has been pretty straightforward. Lonely, but straightforward. And now she's running right back into the chaotic, wondrous adventures that she has with Jamie. But we still don't know a lot about what's happened to him. We know a lot more about what's happened to her. Once we get to that point of Hellwater and him leaving, we don't know anything else about him yet. Thanks for tuning in, and be sure to go to Facebook and follow the A Dram of Outlander page. You can ask to join the A Dram of Outlander group as well. It's a little bit more intimate, and you can just chat with other Outlander fans. Go to Instagram and Twitter, Dram of Outlander. There's no A in front for those. Of course, the website is at dramofoutlander.com. Go. Like the pages. Join in the discussions. I'm always posting questions and memes and articles because I want you all to feel taken care of by me because I appreciate you so much. And you can support the podcast by sharing it. Let other people know about it. Share the website. Go to the iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play links and leave a review that helps people find me. Engage with other fans. There are so many out there, and you will make amazing friends. Join in the Twitter chat on Wednesday night. You don't need to know how to use Twitter well to join in. 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Do a hashtag ADOO chat, and we will talk about what we discussed on the podcast on Wednesday night, and I'm able to get other people's input, and it's really exciting. I think when the show comes back on, it's going to be a pretty busy chat. And the last way that you can support the podcast is to financially support. And that's through patreon.com/adramofOutlander, or you can email me if you want to give a one-time offering. I am a solo podcaster, and I produce, edit, and do everything myself, as well as the upkeep. The email is contact@adramofoutlander.com. Hey, call into the listener line. Leave a voicemail. Give me your comments and questions, thoughts, whatever you want, and they can be included on the show as well. 719-425-9444. And if you want to be a guest host on the show, give me a holler. Send me an email. Leave a message for me through the social media pages. I would love that, to have some listeners come on and join in for part of a podcast. I'm super excited about the coming season. I've heard nothing but amazing things. And September 10th is getting pretty darn close. We better be ready for it. The other thing that will be coming back is Outlander Science Club. Now that we'll be back into Voyager and have lots to do, there wasn't a whole lot for me to cover medically in The Scottish Prisoner and A Fugitive Green because Claire wasn't in them. And we'll be working that full force, so be on the lookout. And again, I thank you for listening. I appreciate you. Without you, there'd be no reason for me to do this. So until next time, Slán Java.